The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Rosewood, a small town in Georgia where time seemed to have given up and left the place to rot. The air was thick with the scent of dust and diesel, and the main street, once a proud stretch of mom-and-pop shops, now stood half-empty, with faded "for sale" signs swinging in the breeze. At the heart of it all was Carter's Kitchen, a modest diner with chipped red vinyl booths and a neon sign that flickered more than it glowed. Inside, Naomi Carter moved like a quiet storm, her hands swift as she wiped down the counter, her dark eyes scanning the nearly empty room. The breakfast rush, if you could call 3 retirees nursing coffee and a lone delivery driver a rush, had petered out, leaving only the hum of an old jukebox playing Johnny Cash in the corner. Naomi, a young black woman with a tight braid and a face that carried both strength and exhaustion, paused to check the cash register. The few crumpled bills inside mocked her. Not enough to cover the rent, let alone the stack of medical bills piling up for her mother, Evelyn, who was fighting a losing battle with heart disease in Rosewood General. Naomi's dreams of becoming a civil rights lawyer back in Atlanta had been packed away 2 years ago when she returned to save the diner her parents had built from nothing. "Just a little longer," she whispered to herself, tucking a stray braid behind her ear, but the words felt like a lie she couldn't stop telling. The town wasn't kind to dreamers anymore. Rosewood had been gutted when the textile mill closed, taking jobs and hope with it. The locals clung to what little they had left, their suspicions sharp as barbed wire, especially toward anyone who didn't fit their mold. Naomi felt it every day, the sidelong glances when she walked to the market, the whispers about that Carter girl who thought she was too good for Rosewood. But Carter's Kitchen was her family's legacy, a place where her parents had served everyone, from truckers to preachers, with the same warm smile. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Feed their stomachs, and you might just feed their souls." As Naomi refilled a coffee pot, the bell above the door chimed, sharp and sudden, cutting through the jukebox's mournful tune. She looked up, and her breath caught. A man stood in the doorway, his silhouette filling the frame like a storm cloud. He concession stand. His boots were scuffed, his jeans faded, and a black leather jacket hung heavy on his broad shoulders. A patch on his chest, a skeletal figure gripping a scythe, marked him as a Hell's Angel, a member of the Grim Reaper's motorcycle club. The diner went quiet. Old Man Jenkins froze mid-sip, his coffee mug trembling in his weathered hand. Sally May, the librarian who came in every morning for her tea, clutched her purse a little tighter. Even the jukebox seemed to falter, skipping a beat. Naomi's pulse quickened, but she squared her shoulders and grabbed a menu. She'd grown up in Rosewood, where outsiders were as welcome as a tax audit, and a black woman running a diner had to be tougher than most. Her mother's words rang clear. Judge the heart, not the clothes. She walked over, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, and set a glass of water in front of the stranger. "Welcome to Carter's," she said, her voice steady, warm, like she was greeting a regular. "Special today's meatloaf with gravy and cornbread. Made it myself this morning." The man looked up, and Naomi's heart skipped. His eyes were a pale, weary gray, like storm clouds after the rain, and they carried a weight that didn't match the roughness of his appearance. His beard was streaked with silver, his hands calloused but unsteady, and a faded hospital bracelet peeked out from his sleeve. "Just coffee," he said, his voice low, like gravel crunching under tires. "Black, quick as you can." Naomi nodded, pouring the steaming brew with care. She noticed the tremble in his fingers as he reached for the mug, the way his shoulders sagged, like he was carrying a mountain no one could see. "Long road?" she asked, keeping her tone light, conversational. He nodded, staring into the coffee's dark surface. "Been riding since midnight, heading to Rosewood General." His voice cracked on the last word, and he added softer, "My kid's there. Leukemia." Naomi's chest tightened. She knew that look. Too many nights spent in hospital waiting rooms, watching her mother fade under fluorescent lights. She didn't press him for more. Instead, she smiled, gentle but firm. "Eggs and toast, on the house. You need something solid for the road." As she turned to call the order to the kitchen, she caught the stares from the other customers. Wary, judgmental, the kind of looks that cut deeper than words. Naomi knew what this moment might cost her in a town like Rosewood, where trust was scarce and grudges were eternal. But she also knew what was right, and Naomi Carter didn't bend when it came to doing right. The bell chimed again, and the air in the diner shifted, sharp as a blade. 2 police officers were about to walk in, and Naomi could already feel the storm brewing. What would she do when the whole town was watching? The air in Carter's kitchen turned thick, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. Naomi Carter stood behind the counter, her heart thudding against her ribs, as the bell above the door gave another sharp jangle. 2 police officers stepped. Inside, Sheriff Tom Grayson, a man whose broad shoulders and permanent scowl made him seem larger than life, and Deputy Carla Ruiz, younger, quieter, her eyes sharp but uncertain. Their boots clicked on the linoleum, deliberate, like a metronome counting down to trouble. The diner's few patrons, Old Man Jenkins, Sally Mae, and the delivery driver, froze, their gazes darting between Naomi and the stranger at the counter. Hank Morrison, the Hell's Angel with the Grim Reaper patch. Grayson's eyes locked onto Hank like a hawk spotting prey. He sauntered forward, his hand resting casually on the holster at his hip, a smile curling his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Well now," he drawled, his voice loud enough to bounce off the diner's faded walls. "Didn't expect to see one of you in Rosewood." The word "you" dripped with disdain, aimed at the leather jacket, the tattoos, the patch that screamed outsider. Hank didn't flinch. He sipped his coffee, slow and steady, his calloused hands steadying around the mug. But Naomi caught the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his gray eyes flickered with something unreadable. Resignation, maybe, or defiance. Naomi's fingers gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles paling. She'd known Grayson since high school, back when he was just a loudmouth jock who thought the world owed him respect. Now, with a badge pinned to his chest, he carried that same arrogance, only sharper, meaner. "He's just here for breakfast." "Sheriff," Naomi said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Same as anyone else." Grayson's head swiveled toward her, his smile twisting into something colder. "Same?" He chuckled, low and humorless, gesturing. "At Hank's patch. That's a Grim Reaper, Naomi. You know what that means. Trouble follows these types. Drugs, fights, you name it." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a warning. "You sure you want to vouch for him?" Hank set his mug down, the clink loud in the stifling silence. "I'm just passing through," he said, his gravelly voice steady but tired. "No trouble here." But Grayson wasn't listening. He stepped closer, invading Hank's space, his hand still hovering near his holster. "Let's see some ID. Biker, we got reports of Reapers stirring things up down in Macon. Gotta make sure you're not one of them." Naomi's blood ran hot. She'd seen this before, Grayson throwing his weight around, picking fights with anyone who didn't fit Rosewood's narrow definition of acceptable. She thought of her mother, Evelyn, lying in a hospital bed, her voice weak but fierce when she'd told Naomi, "Never let a bully scare you into silence." Naomi stepped forward, placing herself between Grayson and Hank, her chin lifted. "He's a paying customer, Tom," she said, her voice sharp now, cutting through the sheriff's bravado. "He's not breaking any laws, and you've got no reason to hassle him." The diner went still like the world was holding its breath. Sally Mae's purse slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Jenkins coughed, his eyes wide. Deputy Ruiz shifted uncomfortably, her hand twitching like she wanted to intervene but didn't know how. Grayson's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You're picking the wrong side, Naomi," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This town doesn't take kindly to folks who cozy up to troublemakers." Naomi's hands trembled. but she didn't back down. She could feel the weight of every stare in the room, the judgment settling over her like dust. She thought of her dreams, buried under the weight of Rosewood's expectations, and the promise she'd made to keep Carter's Kitchen a place where everyone was welcome. "I'm not picking sides," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I'm doing what's right. You want to check IDs? Start with everyone in here, not just the guy you don't like the look of." Grayson's jaw clenched, his face reddening. For a moment, Naomi thought he might push it further, but Hank spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "It's fine," he said, reaching slowly into his jacket. He pulled out a worn wallet and slid his ID across the counter. Grayson snatched it up, scanning it like he was looking for a reason to arrest him on the spot. After a long, tense moment, he tossed it back. "Stay out of trouble, Morrison," he spat, then turned to Naomi. "You're gonna regret this." He stormed out, the bell clanging behind him. Deputy Ruiz hesitated, her eyes meeting Naomi's for a fleeting second. An apology, maybe, or pity, before she followed. The diner exhaled, but the air felt heavier now, charged with something Naomi couldn't name. Hank pushed his plate away, leaving a $10 bill under his mug despite Naomi's earlier offer. "Didn't mean to cause you grief," he said quietly, standing. "Name's Hank Morrison. Thanks for the coffee." Naomi managed a small smile, her heart still racing. "Naomi Carter. Safe travels, Hank." He nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his tired eyes, then walked out into the glaring morning sun. Naomi watched him go, the hospital bracelet on his wrist glinting like a quiet cry for help. She knew what she'd done would ripple through Rosewood like a stone in a still pond. This town didn't forgive easily, and she just painted a target on her back. As she cleared Hank's plate, the jukebox clicked to a new song, its mournful chords filling the silence. Outside, the street was quiet, but Naomi could feel the storm gathering, the whispers already spreading. What would happen when Rosewood's judgment came knocking? The morning light spilled through the dusty windows of Carter's Kitchen, but it did little to warm the chill that had settled over the diner. Naomi Carter stood behind the counter, her hands moving mechanically as she polished an already spotless coffee pot. The jukebox was silent now, its cheerful hum replaced by the heavy quiet of a place holding its breath. The breakfast rush should have been in full swing. Old man Jenkins arguing over his eggs, Sally Mae sipping her tea while scribbling in her notebook. But the booths sat empty, the air thick with the absence of Rosewood's usual crowd. Naomi's chest tightened as she glanced at the tip jar, still holding yesterday's lone $10 bill from Hank Morrison, the Hells Angel she'd defended. Word traveled fast in a town like Rosewood, where gossip was currency and grudges were heirlooms. By noon yesterday, the story of Naomi standing up to Sheriff Grayson had spread like wildfire. She'd heard the whispers in the market, caught the averted glances at the gas station. Troublemaker, they called her. Biker lover. The shy words stung, but not as much as the silence. No one had come in all morning, not the retirees, not the delivery drivers, not even the kids who usually begged for free fries. Carter's Kitchen, her family's heartbeat was bleeding out, and Naomi could feel every drop. She leaned against the counter, her braid falling loose as she pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to push back the ache. Her mother's words echoed, in her mind. You don't bend for their hate, Naomi. You stand tall for what's right. But standing tall felt lonely today. The medical bills for her mother, Evelyn, were piling up, and the diner's rent was due in a week. Naomi had given up her dreams of law school to keep this place alive, but now she wondered if Rosewood would let it die just to punish her. The bell above the door gave a weak chime, and Naomi's head snapped up, hope flickering for a moment. But it was only Jamal, her childhood friend and part-time cook, his lanky frame slouched in the doorway. His usual grin was gone, replaced by a frown that made him look older than his 25 years. Naomi, he said, his voice low, cautious. You see what they did outside? Her stomach dropped. She followed Jamal to the front door, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum. Taped to the glass was a piece of paper, its edges curling in the morning heat. Scrawled in black marker were the words, "No outsiders, no traitors." Naomi's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she ripped the paper down, crumpling it in her fist. The ink smudged against her palm like it was trying to brand her. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice tight. Jamal shrugged, his eyes scanning the empty street. "Could be anyone. You know how folks get when you cross Grayson." "They're scared, Naomi, scared of him, scared of change." He hesitated, then added, softer, "You sure about this? Standing up for that biker? People are talking. They say you're picking fights you can't win." Naomi's jaw tightened. She thought of Hank's trembling hands, the hospital bracelet, glinting on his wrist, the way he'd spoken of his daughter's leukemia with a pain that cut through his tough exterior. She thought of her mother, lying in Rosewood General, her heart weak but her spirit fierce, teaching Naomi to judge people by their actions, not their labels. "I didn't pick a fight," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I did what was right. If this town wants to hate me for that, let them." Jamal nodded, but his eyes were heavy with worry. "Just be careful, okay? Grayson's not done with you." He headed to the kitchen to prep for a lunch rush that might never come, leaving Naomi alone with the crumpled paper in her hand. She tossed it into the trash, but the words lingered, sharp as broken glass. As the afternoon dragged on, the diner remained a ghost town. Naomi busied herself scrubbing tables, refilling salt shakers, anything to keep her hands moving and her mind from spiraling. She kept glancing at the door, half expecting Grayson to barge back in, or worse, a crowd with more signs, more hate. The weight of Rosewood's judgment pressed down on her, but so did the memory of her mother's voice. "Righteousness doesn't come cheap, baby." At dusk, Naomi locked up, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. She walked the 3 blocks to Rosewood General, the hospital's fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the cracked sidewalk. In room 312, her mother lay still, her breathing shallow under the thin hospital blanket. Naomi pulled a chair close, taking Evelyn's hand, its warmth a fragile tether to the woman who'd raised her to be unbreakable. "Hey, Mama," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Tough day. I might have made some enemies." She managed a small laugh, brushing a tear from her cheek. "But I stood up for someone today. A dad, just trying to get to his kid. You'd have done the same, right?" The monitors beeped softly, a steady rhythm that felt like the only answer she'd get. Naomi leaned closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Mama. The town's turning on me and I'm scared. But I can't back down. Not now." She kissed her mother's hand, the gesture grounding her, filling her with a stubborn spark of resolve. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today, Hank." Naomi's breath hitched. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, but those 4 words felt like a lifeline in the dark. She stepped out into the cool night air, the hospital behind her, and the quiet streets of Rosewood stretching out ahead. The town was silent, but Naomi could feel its eyes watching, waiting. Something was coming, something bigger than a sign on a door. What would she find when she opened Carter's kitchen tomorrow? The dawn broke over Rosewood with a pale, hesitant light, as if the sun itself wasn't sure it wanted to face the day. Naomi Carter unlocked the front door of Carter's kitchen, her hands steady, but her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The crumpled paper with its hateful words, "No outsiders, no traitors," still burned in her memory, though she'd burned the note itself in a trash can behind the diner last night. The flames had devoured it, but they couldn't erase the weight of Rosewood's rejection. The diner was her last tether to her family's legacy, to her mother's dream of a place where everyone belonged. Now it felt like a sinking ship, and Naomi was the only one still bailing water. She flipped on the lights, the neon sign buzzing weakly as it flickered to life. The diner was spotless from yesterday's restless cleaning, but the emptiness gnawed at her. No clatter of dishes, no hum of conversation, just the faint creak of the ceiling fan spinning above. Naomi tied her apron, its familiar weight grounding her, and started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. She didn't expect customers, not after yesterday's standoff with Sheriff Grayson and the town's cold shoulder, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Courage isn't loud, Naomi. It's the quiet choice to keep going. By mid-morning, the diner remained a ghost town. Jamal had called in sick, his voice heavy with guilt over the phone, and Naomi didn't push him. She knew he was caught between loyalty to her and the town's growing hostility. Alone, she leaned against the counter, staring at the empty booths, her thoughts spiraling. The rent was due in 5 days. The hospital bills were overdue, and the dream of law school, of fighting for social justice in courtrooms, felt like a life that belonged to someone else. She closed her eyes, fighting the sting of tears, when the bell above the door chimed. Sharp, unexpected, like a crack in the silence. Naomi's head snapped up, her breath catching. 2 strangers stood in the doorway. A man, wiry and weathered, with a gray ponytail and a leather vest bearing a small silver skull pin, and a woman with sharp cheekbones and a braid streaked with white, her denim jacket patched with the same Grim Reaper insignia as Hank's. They didn't carry the weight of the town's judgment in their eyes, only a quiet purpose. "Naomi Carter?" the man asked, his voice rough but kind, like he'd spent years shouting over engines. She nodded, wary, her hand tightening on the counter. "That's me. What can I do for you?" "I'm Roy Morrison," he said, stepping forward, his boots soft on the linoleum. "This is my wife, Linda. We're Hank's family." Naomi's shoulders eased, just a fraction, as recognition clicked. "Hank told us what you did," Linda said, her voice warm, like a hearth fire. "On a cold night. How you stood up to that sheriff for him. How you saw a man, not just a patch." She paused, her eyes softening. "Not many would have done that." Naomi shrugged, brushing off the weight of their words, though they settled deep in her chest. "He needed a break, not a fight. Just gave him what anyone deserves." Roy's lips twitched into a faint smile, and he exchanged a glance with Linda. "That's exactly why we're here," he said. "To say thank you." Before Naomi could respond, a low rumble rolled through the street outside, like distant thunder gathering strength. She frowned, stepping to the window, and her breath caught in her throat. The horizon shimmered with chrome, a line of motorcycles stretching as far as she could see. Engines growled, deep and steady, as dozens of riders rolled into Rosewood, their leather jackets and patched vests glinting in the morning sun. They parked in neat rows, filling the lot outside Carter's kitchen, their boots kicking up dust as they dismounted. Men and women, young and old, their faces weathered by roads and stories Naomi could only imagine. Each bore the mark of the Grim Reapers, but their eyes held something else: gratitude, respect, a quiet strength. Naomi turned to Roy, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" Linda's smile widened, her eyes bright with something like pride. "Hank told our chapter about you. They told others. Word spreads fast when someone shows true justice." She gestured to the growing crowd outside. "These folks came from all over Georgia, some from Alabama. They're here because you treated one of ours like he mattered." Naomi's heart pounded, a mix of awe and disbelief. "But I don't have enough food for all these people," she stammered, her mind racing to the nearly empty pantry. Roy chuckled, a low, warm sound. "Taken care of. We called your supplier last night. Truck's on its way. No cost to you." Naomi blinked, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. Why do this for me? Roy's gaze held hers, steady and sure. Because when the world spits on us, we don't forget the ones who offer a hand instead. The bell chimed again as the first riders stepped inside, their presence filling the diner with a new kind of energy, vibrant, alive, unbroken. Naomi looked out at the sea of leather and chrome, her fear giving way to something fiercer, something like hope. But as the engines quieted and the riders settled in, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure across the street, Sheriff Grayson, watching from his cruiser, his eyes dark with something dangerous. What would he do when the town saw her diner come alive again? The sun climbed higher over Rosewood, casting long shadows through the windows of Carter's kitchen, where the air now thrummed with a pulse Naomi Carter hadn't felt in years. The diner was alive, buzzing with the low hum of voices, the clink of forks against plates, and the occasional burst of laughter that drowned out the creaky ceiling fan. The once empty booths were packed with leather-clad bikers, their Grim Reaper patches catching the light as they swapped stories over steaming mugs of coffee. Men with weathered faces and women with steel in their eyes filled every corner, their presence transforming the diner into something more than a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a rebellion, a stand against Rosewood's suffocating judgment. Naomi moved like a conductor in an orchestra of chaos, refilling coffee, sliding plates of meatloaf and cornbread across the counter, her sneakers squeaking with every quick step. The delivery truck had arrived just as Roy promised. Crates of fresh produce and supplies stacked high in the kitchen, courtesy of the Grim Reaper's network. She'd called in her cousin, Tasha, to help with the sudden rush, and even Jamal had shown up, his earlier hesitation replaced by a determined nod as he flipped burgers in the back. The diner was breathing again, and Naomi felt its heartbeat in her own chest, fierce and unyielding. Outside, the chrome of the motorcycles gleamed under the midday sun, drawing curious glances from Rosewood's residents. A few locals, hesitant, at first, crossed the street to peer inside. There was Molly, Naomi's old high school friend, who stepped in with a shy smile and ordered her usual biscuits, sitting cautiously beside a biker with a braided beard and a laugh like thunder. Old man Jenkins, who'd avoided the diner all morning, shuffled in, his eyes wide as he took in the crowd. Even Sally Mae, clutching her notebook like a shield, settled into a booth and struck up a conversation with a woman whose leather vest read, "Ride Free." The air crackled with something new. Connection, possibility, a breaking of old walls. Naomi caught her breath by the pass-through window, watching the scene unfold. This was what her mother, Evelyn, had always envisioned for Carter's kitchen, a place where differences didn't divide, where a shared meal could mend what words couldn't. But the weight of Sheriff Grayson's glare from across the street lingered in her mind, a dark cloud on the edge of this bright moment. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the warmth of the diner, the way it felt like a home again. The bell chimed, and the chatter quieted as a towering figure stepped inside. He was older, his white hair cropped close, his leather vest heavy, with patches that marked him as someone important. The bold letters across his chest read, "President, Grim Reaper's MC, Macon Chapter." Naomi's pulse quickened as she stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome to Carter's," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden hush in the room. The man smiled, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that softened his rugged frame. "You must be Naomi," he said, his voice deep and resonant like a preacher at a pulpit. "I'm Marcus Turner, president of our Macon crew." He extended a hand, and Naomi shook it, her grip firm despite the butterflies in her stomach. Marcus turned to the room, raising a hand, and the diners, bikers, and locals alike fell silent, their attention locked on him. "I'm here to say something about this woman," Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and pride. "When Rosewood turned its back on one of ours, Naomi Carter didn't. When a man was judged for his jacket, she saw his heart, a father fighting for his kid." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, bikers nodding, their fists tapping, tables in quiet respect. "In our world," Marcus continued. Loyalty is everything. Respect is everything. And Naomi showed both when it wasn't easy. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, landing briefly on Deputy Carla Ruiz, who'd slipped in quietly and now sat at the counter, her uniform traded for jeans and a hesitant expression. Carter's Kitchen, Marcus said, his voice rising, is under the protection of the Grim Reapers from this day forward. A cheer erupted, loud and raw, shaking the diner's walls. Bikers stomped their boots, locals clapped, and Naomi stood frozen, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. Marcus raised a hand for quiet, his gold-capped tooth flashing as he grinned. And if anyone in this town has a problem with that, they'll answer to us. The room roared again, the sound washing over Naomi like a wave. She caught Hank Morrison's eye across the diner, standing near the door with Roy and Linda. He gave her a small nod, his gray eyes bright with something like pride. Naomi's vision blurred, tears threatening to spill, but she blinked them back, her heart swelling with a fierce, fragile hope. This wasn't just about her diner, it was about inspiring change, about proving that one act of courage could ripple outward, cracking the foundations of a town built on fear. As the cheers faded, Marcus leaned closer, his voice low. Hank's kid, Lila, she's showing signs of fighting back. The treatment's working, thanks to you giving him a moment of peace. Naomi's breath caught, a giddy relief flooding her chest. She managed a nod, her voice lost in the tide of emotion. Marcus clapped her shoulder, then called out, "Now, who's got some of that cornbread I've been hearing about?" Laughter broke out, and the diner sprang back to life, plates clattering, voices rising. Naomi moved through the crowd, her apron stained but her spirit alight. Outside, more locals gathered, their curiosity outweighing their caution. Kids darted between the motorcycles, their laughter mingling with the hum of classic rock spilling from a portable speaker. But as Naomi glanced out the window, she saw Sheriff Grayson's cruiser still parked across the street, his silhouette unmoving, watching. The diner was alive, but the storm wasn't over. What would it take to keep this fragile piece alive? The golden hues of late afternoon bathed Rosewood, softening the rough edges of its cracked streets and faded storefronts. Inside Carter's Kitchen, the air was thick with the scent of cornbread, coffee, and something less tangible. Hope. Naomi. Carter stood at the heart of it all, her apron streaked with flour, her braid loose from a day of relentless motion. The diner pulsed with life, a vibrant tapestry of leather-clad bikers and curious locals sharing stories over plates of food. Laughter spilled from booths, where Molly taught a group of reapers how to fold paper cranes, and Old Man Jenkins swapped fishing tales with a biker whose tattoos told stories of their own. Even Deputy Carla Ruiz, now a regular in her off-duty jeans, lingered at the counter, her smile hesitant but genuine as she chatted with Tasha, Naomi's cousin. The day had unfolded. Like a miracle the kind Naomi's mother, Evelyn, had always believed in. Carter's Kitchen wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a bridge, a place where Rosewood's rigid lines of us and them blurred into something human. Naomi glanced at the wall where her mother's old apron hung, its faded stains, a testament to decades of love poured into this place. Next to it, a new addition, a black leather vest, stitched with Carter's Kitchen, friend of the Reapers. The gift from Roy and Linda Morrison, presented earlier that day, felt like a badge of honor, a symbol of moral courage that Naomi carried in her chest like a second heartbeat. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the diner, the bell chimed one last time. Naomi turned, her breath catching as Hank Morrison stepped inside, his weathered face softer than she'd ever seen it. His gray eyes, once heavy with exhaustion, sparkled with something new. Relief, maybe even joy. He crossed the room, stopping just short of the counter, and cleared his throat. "Naomi," he said, his gravelly voice thick with emotion. Got some news. Lila's treatment, it's working. She's got a fighting chance now. His voice broke, and he held up his wrist, the hospital bracelet still dangling like a fragile promise. She wants to meet you. Says you're the kind of woman she wants to grow up to be. Naomi's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. Without thinking, she stepped around the counter and pulled Hank into a hug, fierce and unyielding. He stiffened for a moment, then hugged her back, his arms strong despite the weight he'd carried. The diner erupted in applause, bikers and locals alike cheering for a victory that felt shared. Naomi pulled back, wiping her eyes with a laugh. "Tell Lila I can't wait to meet her," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "And tell her to keep fighting." As the crowd settled, Naomi caught sight of a figure in the doorway, Sheriff Tom Grayson, his uniform crisp, his hat in hand. The room quieted, a ripple of tension cutting through the warmth. Grayson stepped forward, his boots slow and deliberate, his face unreadable. Naomi braced herself, her heart pounding, but she held his gaze, unflinching. The memory of her mother's words steadied her. "Righteousness doesn't come cheap, baby." Grayson stopped at the counter, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Naomi. "Busy day," he said, his voice gruff, but lacking its usual edge. He set his hat down, a small gesture that felt like a surrender. "Coffee?" Naomi nodded, pouring a mug with steady hands, sliding it across the counter without a word. Grayson wrapped his fingers around it, staring into the dark liquid like it held answers he didn't have. "This town," he said finally, his voice low. "It's changing. Maybe I got some things wrong." Naomi didn't respond, letting the silence speak. It wasn't an apology, not quite, but it was a crack in the armor of a man who'd ruled Rosewood with fear. Grayson took a sip, then met her eyes. "You've got something special here, Carter. Don't let it go." He left, a $5 bill on the counter, and walked out, the bell chiming softly behind him. The diner exhaled, and Naomi felt a weight lift, not completely, but enough to breathe a little easier. As night fell, the crowd thinned, bikes rumbling off into the twilight, leaving behind the faint smell of exhaust and the echo of laughter. Naomi stood on the diner's front steps, her apron still tied, her arms crossed against the cooling air. The neon sign flickered above, casting a soft glow over the street. Roy and Linda approached, their hands clasped, their smiles warm. Linda handed Naomi a small, folded note, Hank's handwriting scrawled across it. "Thank you for seeing me. Lila's smiling because of you." Naomi pressed the note to her chest, her eyes stinging with tears she didn't fight this time. "This place," Roy said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's more than a diner now. It's a symbol. You showed true justice when it wasn't easy, and that's something this world needs more of." Naomi nodded, her voice lost in the swell of emotion. She looked back at Carter's kitchen, its windows glowing, its heart beating strong. This was her mother's dream, her family's legacy, and now her fight. Rosewood was still flawed, still stubborn, but today it had taken a step towards systemic change, and Naomi had been the spark. As she locked up for the night, Naomi felt a fire in her chest, a fire for justice, for connection, for a world where no one was judged by the patches they wore or the skin they lived in. Carter's kitchen wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, a beacon for anyone who needed a seat at the table, and Naomi knew, deep in her bones, that she'd keep fighting for it, one cup of coffee at a time. This story isn't just about a diner in a small town. It's about the power of standing up, of seeing people for who they are, not what they seem. In a world quick to judge, moral courage can change everything. It's a reminder that social justice starts with small acts, offering a meal, a kind word, or a refusal to back down. Studies show that communities thrive when we bridge divides, with 68% of Americans saying they'd support businesses that promote inclusivity. Pew Research 2023. So let's take a page from Naomi's book. See the person, not the label, and watch how one spark can light up a town. If this story moved you, hit that like button to show your support for stories that inspire change. Subscribe and ring the notification bell to catch more tales of real drama and emotional truth every week. Share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what does true justice mean to you? Let's build a community that stands for something bigger together.